is based on a Sikha from Rebbe. So I don't want to say it's a Sikha from Rebbe because it's not in that order at all. But the point essentially is based on a Sikha from Rebbe. This is Dvorim. And Dvorim essentially is when Moshe Rabbeinu recounts the various occurrences, the various experiences that Eden had, and repeats and teaches them the Torah again. And right in the beginning, he says that after they received the Torah in Chorev, in Har Sinai, Hashem told him, now is the time to go into Eretz Yisrael. And the way it's expressed in the Torah is, it says, just go and take it over. And then it says there's a very interesting posuk that Rashi comments on, where it says, Re'ei nosati lifnechem es ha'oretz, observe, see with your own eyes that I've given the land to you, go and take it over. So Rashi says that what is the implication here that they could go and take it over and they could see that it's already theirs? The implication is that in fact the intent, Hashem's intent was that Eden would just enter Eretz Yisrael and the Goyim that would live there at the time would just evacuate. There would be no milchama. And Rashi says, Iluli sholchu meraglim, had they not sent meraglim, lohoye tzrichim liklezayim, then they would not need weapons. They would just go in and take over the land because Hashem promised the land to them and it's their land. And all the Goyim would recognize that this is their land and they would just find other places to settle. This is what Hashem told them after they mekabel the Torah. You should recognize and see that this land is yours because I've given it to you, and all you need to do is just go there and enter it. Instead, Eden chose to send meraglim. And what was the object of the meraglim? The object of the meraglim was that they should go and see. I mean, from the Eden's point of view, a meraglim should go and see and substantiate. What substantiate means? No. They should explain how this is possible. Hashem said, take over. Go and see whether in fact we can take it over. And what type of nation is there? Are they strong? Will we be able to stand up to them? Are the cities fortified? Mitzuros. Can we enter the cities with a fortified city? In those days was impregnable. You can't go in. As a result of this, the whole situation changed. The whole process of conquering Eretz Yisrael completely took a turn and completely changed. Besides the fact that that generation never saw Eretz Yisrael, but even later on when they did go into Eretz Yisrael and they were victorious, but they were victorious at war. And when Reuven and Gad, the two tribes, Reuven and Gad said, we already have our land, we don't need to go, Moshe reprimanded them and says, this is going to be a war. You can't send your brothers to war and you stay behind. It was going to be a war. The whole perspective changed. Yeah.
Interrupt this beginning, but how does it make sense if Hashem told them all you have to do is just show up and they're basically going to pack up their bags and leave? So how does it make sense to say, let's find out if there are weak people or strong people and what's the best way to go in? Or does it matter if they're weak or strong? If they're going to leave, it doesn't matter how you go in and how strong they are and how the cities are.
Right. Well, Hashem did not, in fact, say to them exactly that this is what's going to happen. Hashem said to them, go and take it over. But the implication is, it's yours just for the taking. Had they had full trust in that, even though it didn't make any sense, so to speak, to their human mind, they would just follow through, and there would be no resistance.
You'd asked them to do crazier things already before, like walking to the middle of the Red Sea, and that worked.
That's right. In the Red Sea, even though they were actually told go in,
they didn't go either.
They didn't go either. There was only one man who had that strength to go and jump into the sea. So in other words, this is not that simple. But nevertheless, even there, it wasn't spelled out, this is what I want you to do. I want you to go and take over Israel. In other words, what clearly happened over here, if Yidden would recognize the power with which they are going, we recognize that they are not going with natural and human power. They're going on the basis of the fact that Hashem is walking with them, is taking them there. And Hashem had already designated, not only designated, but had already established this as their land that belongs to them. Then it would be just a walking. And when they turn back and they say, no, we need to see how we are unable to accomplish it, then it becomes a whole process with a lot of obstacles and successes and failures. So I want to mainly translate this, what it means to us over here. We are here in Yeshiva to learn Torah. We are here in Yeshiva to learn Hashem's Torah. In other words, this is not just a course of study that was designed by human beings and has a finite, a limited degree of insight, of depth. It can be completely, fully comprehended because it was designed by human beings, like mathematics and physics and such other fields. This is a Torah written by God Himself. And when one comes to learn this Torah, and it's not just coming to learn the Torah, but to learn how to live by the Torah, how to absorb its principles, how to relate to its view, to its way of interpreting everything that happens, everything that one perceives in the world and in his own life. So, in approaching this, there are two paths. One path is the path of the Meraglim. The Meraglim means, let me try it, let me test it, let me taste it, let me see, and this is something which I can readily relate to. Let me see if I can, by my judgment, if I can really acquire it, if I can really get into it. In other words, we're approaching it in this phase, in this mode, we're approaching it from recognizing only our own koiches, our own abilities, the same abilities of learning that we experienced outside of Torah. These very same abilities we are going to try to acquire Torah with. And then, of course, when we come to that, there is a whole battle. Tzrichim liklei zayin. You really have to prepare your weapons, because the Yetzer Hara is going to be there at every step in the way. He's going to say, what are you acquiring over here? You're never going to make it. This is beyond your ability. And even if he stubbornly sticks by it, it's a constant battle. There are successes, there are failures, there are ups and there are downs. There are moments that he thinks, oh, maybe I'm making it, and then he says, no, I'm not making it. This is the path of the Meraglim. And where does it come from? As I said, it comes from the perception that all we have at our disposal, the reason that we are able to learn and acquire this Torah, is only because we have our human brain. This is all that we've experienced outside of Torah, outside of Yeshiva, and this is the only thing that we have to bring to the table over here when you start learning Torah. But there's another path, and this other path reflects the truth much, much more closely. During the Matan Torah, I'm going to explain this, so to speak, from its basic process. At Matan Torah, at the time when the Rebbe gave us the Torah, you all know that Yidden then reached a point of clarity, a point of vision and perception, where they were able to say, Naaseh v'nishma. What does Naaseh v'nishma mean? We discussed it in the past from various angles. But the Medrash says that Naaseh v'nishma represented a tremendous insight. And what insight? A deep understanding that he didn't have. Naaseh v'nishma, the only way that it's possible to say Naaseh v'nishma, normally we explain it that they accepted the rulership of the Meibashn and they will obey everything that he says. But if we reflect on it and see, how is it possible for a whole nation to say Nasa v'nishma? How do you know that you're going to be able to do it? Why didn't you say first? As a matter of fact, the Gemara tells us that before Hashem gave the Torah to the Yidden, He went out to other nations and offered the Torah to them. Did you ever hear that? He offered the Torah to the Ishmael, to the Yesod, and they refused the Torah. But they refused the Torah on some principle. They said, tell us what it says in the Torah. And he told them what it says. He says, no, I can't relate to it. I can't accept it. He even said, Nasa v'nishma, not just that they had no objection to any of the dinim, any of the rules of the Torah. Bnei Yisrael, the Rebbe says, lo tirtzach. So Bnei Yisrael said, lo tirtzach, I can't, because Achar b'chotichye, Yitzchak gave me a bracha that I have to live on my sword. And then Yishmael, he says, Lesinov, Lesignoi, and he said, we can't. In other words, he said, it goes against my grain. And then Yisrael, they should have also asked, what does it say? And then they would say, oh, we agree with everything, we can accept everything. Everything fits in. That's not what happened. What happened was that they didn't even ask, what does it say in the Torah? And then they said Nasa v'nishma. How do they know that they could do it? A human being, after all, has a limited capacity, limited ability. How did they know you were able to do it? The answer is, they didn't. And it's not a question of relying and trusting and so forth. They had no idea what it says. They had no idea how they're going to do it. But they recognized at that time, and from that time on for all times, that they and Hashem is one thing. It's almost true to say, it's a form of speech which is a little bit odd, but it's almost true to say, if Hashem can do it, we can do it. Because Hashem gave us His koiches. It's not a question of what I can do. I'm not going to send Meragli. I'm not going to try to figure out what it is, because I'm getting my koiches, my ability to do what I need to do, not from a natural source, but from a godly source. And this is what enabled them to say Nasa v'nishma.
That they said it before asking anything what was in it, isn't that in itself Nasa v'nishma? I mean, are they going to say before we're going to say we're going to do without understanding? First, let us understand so we can say it. It seems contrary to that, doesn't it? The very fact that they said the fact that they said it without asking what's in it, this in itself is Nasa v'nishma. First, we're going to say yes, we're going to do it, and then later we'll find out what's inside of it. Later, we'll understand what it's all about.
You're asking why they need to say Nishma, because it's already included?
I'm saying that the very fact that they said Nasa v'nishma without first asking like all the other nations what's in it, this in itself is an act of Nasa v'nishma, because they accepted it before trying to understand it. The act of them even saying it was Nasa v'nishma. Unlike the other nation that said, let us understand what's in it, and then we'll decide whether or not we want to take it. And the Jews didn't do that, because it goes along with the entire idea that first we're going to say, yeah, we'll take it, and then later on we'll understand.
Okay, I still need to pin down your question. Yes, this is an act that substantiates, that conforms to Nasa v'nishma.
So the question is, why is it that they didn't ask like the other nations? Because the very act of them asking would negate the entire idea of Nasa v'nishma, wouldn't it? If they were going to say, first let us see what's in it, and then they're going to say, okay, we're going to do, and then we're going to understand, then it's not Nasa v'nishma anymore, because first they tried to understand it.
See, the principle of the nishma, I once explained in one of these sessions here, that it's true that Eden said Nasa v'nishma. And at that time, when they said Nasa v'nishma, that's when the whole thing broke through and they were accepted and the Eibusher gave us a Torah. Prior to saying Nasa v'nishma, the Eden said Nasa without saying Nishma. 3 times. It says in Torah 3 times they said Nasa. And that wasn't sufficient. It wasn't good enough. Huh? No, but Nasa v'nishma, that's when he accepted. That's when it was accepted. To explain what is this v'nishma, if you say it's in terms of obedience, so then if nishma means we just learn later, we obey right away, so then Nasa is involved better. Whatever you'll tell us, we'll do. Nasa. So explain that the v'nishma means that they're saying, we will do whatever you tell us. But it does not mean that we are not interested to know its meaning and its significance. One could say, I'm just going to obey what you say, because I don't care what it is. And I'm going to continue to do it just because you tell me to do it. That means that there is no interest in a personal relationship, in getting personally involved. It's just that I'm obedient. And Hashem said, no, that's not what he's looking for. He's looking for Eden to actually want to have Nishma ultimately, to get into it and understand. Therefore, the Nasa v'nishma does not mean the way you interpret that. We'll be accept to do, but you will tell me later what to do. Because before that it says, whatever Hashem says, we will do. So in other words, the fact that they will do what they are told to do is already mentioned in the Nasa itself. The v'nishma is an additional thing. But then we will put ourselves into it and really delve into the Torah and try to really understand its significance and its secrets. That's what the v'nishma is. Okay. So on what basis did Eden approach the Matan Torah? How do they say we are going to do without knowing what's going to be required? The answer is that if they felt that their ability to do is limited by their own ability, by their own koiches, then they couldn't do it. Because they recognize that they're not limited by their own koiches. Because they recognize that they have a godly spark in them, and which is not limited. Therefore, that's why they were able to say Nasa v'nishma. This is the principle of how we approach learning Torah Bichlal and how we approach Yiddishkeit. Because you know that Yidden have gone through history quite a difficult challenge. It's not within human ability to go through what Yidden went through. And ultimately, the whole purpose of this whole process is to show that the Yidden, as a matter of fact, have koiches, have abilities that are not limited to the human limit. This is why there is no question as to can I do it or cannot not do it. Because on what basis are you going to judge it? On the basis of your previous experience? That's has nothing to do with Torah. The Torah is given to the Yidden, just like Eretz Yisrael. The Rebbe says Eretz Yisrael is yours. It's yours. All you have to do is go in and take it. The only thing that's going to prevent it from being yours is if you don't go and take it. But if you're willing to take it, it's yours, or it's yours even from before. The same thing is with Torah. The Torah has been given to the Yid. And when we approach learning Torah, we do not approach learning Torah on the basis of what a human being is able to learn. We are approaching learning Torah on the basis of what our neshama has, the ability that we have as a gift from Hashem Himself. As the Alter Rebbe explains in Tanya, and everybody here learned it, I'm sure, this is right in the beginning of Tanya, that there is a godly soul in every Yid that is really godly, is part of Hashem. And this godly soul is able to relate and to understand Hashem's words, and to understand in Hashem's Torah. And to relate to it, and to absorb it, and to recognize that this is His, that it's part of Him, and He is part of it. After that, once you go into the land, even afterwards, when Eden went into Eretz Yisrael, let's say if Eden had gone into Eretz Yisrael the way Hashem originally planned it, they would go into the soil without weapons, without resistance. They would still have to go to plow the land, right? Tachlis, you have to plow the land, you have to seed it, you have to harvest it, and you have to do the mitzvahs with it and everything else. So you still have to work with it. In other words, you still have to apply yourself to the natural process. But the approach, the koyach, where we get to apply yourself with the natural process, you get it from a godly gift. The same thing exactly is in the union from Torah. Hashem gave us the Torah. And every Yid who accepts, who recognizes that the Torah is his, has no fear to go and sit down and learn Torah. And the minute he learns Torah, he knows that his neshama absorbs it. But afterwards, he has to work to get his nefesh habahamis also to understand. But that's like plowing the field. That's the work that comes afterwards. This is why we say that when a Yid sits and even he says the words of Torah, he already is learning Torah. He already has the mitzvah of learning Torah. It's his, because the Torah is his. It's not only what you understand with your mind, what you are able to explain to your nefesh habahamis is what is yours. The whole Torah is yours. But then afterwards, you have to, of course, work to bring it in so that your natural seichel, your human seichel, will also be able to understand. That's called avodah. That's called teaching your nefesh habahamis the Torah. But it is extremely important to understand that if a person, let's say a person has a field here in New York, and he plows and he seeds and he harvests the field, it's all his. He's not chayiv in truma, he's not chayiv in meiser, he's not chayiv in all the mitzvahs that have to do with progress of the land, because it doesn't become holy. It's not a holy land. If he plows and seeds in Eretz Yisrael, then he's chayiv in all the mitzvahs that comes from the land. In other words, there are two things involved. There is involved the fact that a Yid does it, and the fact that he does it in the land that Hashem gave him. The same thing exactly is what's taking place in Torah. In Torah also, first there is the taking on, the accepting, and that becomes yours. Then there is the inyan that you learn it, and which is the plowing the field and seeding the field, and then becomes the produce that grows from it becomes also Kodesh. There is a very strong question that is asked. We know that the Rebbe's way and the way that Lubavitch, Bichlal, how a person can come to do tshuva has to be gradual. A person cannot suddenly change his whole life without gradually getting used to it. So we say to a person, we say, first take on Shabbos and Kashrus, principal things. You'll put on a black hat later on, or some other things. You put on 2 pairs of tefillin later on. Do principal things and get used to it slowly. There is a similar approach in a path that we don't agree with at all. In those areas where people are compromising and saying, "Hey, you don't have to do everything. You have to do a little bit. A little bit is also good enough." So say, what's the difference? Why don't you approve like the conservatives? They have this approach. We say no, we don't approve it at all. What is the principal difference? The principal difference is that the first principle that we tell a Yidden is that the whole Torah is yours. He has to know that there is a whole Torah and belongs to him, and he belongs to it. Then, once you accept the whole Torah, practically speaking, it takes time to learn what to do and to get used to it and to be able to do it normally. But after that you accepted the Torah. If you don't accept the whole Torah, you would accept only parts of it, then this is not an Matan Torah. This is the derech of the Meraglim. Tell me first what I can do, and I'll see if I'm up to it, if I agree with it. If I agree with it, and if I can handle it, then I'll do it. And if I can't handle it, then I won't do it. Then you have a lifetime of war. A lifetime of war. Constantly waging war against your enemy. There's a big difference between labor, plowing the field, working hard to produce produce, and waging war against your enemy. When you're constantly feeling that you are constantly you're defending yourself, you're defending your Torah. This is the difference between the way Hashem planned for us to enter Eretz Yisrael and the way it actually happened because of the sin of the Meraglim. And this is also, we must understand that this teaches us also how we are to come into Torah. We have to know that the Torah that we have, this is our Torah. Hashem himself gave it to us. He put it into our heart. He put it into our mind. He uplifted us to the point where we can relate to it fully as one. Na'aseh v'nishma. It doesn't mean that the Torah will fly into our heads without effort. We'll have to make a lot of effort. But we are not fighting off an enemy. You know that in the time of the second Beis Hamikdash, The second was Hamikdash. When after the Churban of the first Hamikdash, Nidnu were exiled into Bavel, to Babylonia. And Bavel was taken over by Syria, and then Syria was taken over by Persia. Ultimately, the Persians were the rulers at the time, and then the Persian king allowed Eden to go back to Eretz Yisrael. It took 20 years, whatever. Finally, they were building the Beis Hamikdash. And they were building the walls of Yerushalayim, actually. So it says in Tanakh that the way they were doing it is they had soldiers standing with arms, with swords and spears, protecting the people who were building the wall of Yerushalayim. It wasn't an union that they were building. They were building, so to speak, with Mesiras Nefesh. They had to stand there and protect against enemies. When we learn Torah, we have to recognize, we have to feel and understand that this is ours. We don't have to protect against, we don't have to stand up to enemies. We don't need to defend it, we don't need to apologize to anyone. This is our Torah. If I understand it, it's fine. If I don't understand it, it's also fine. It's still my Torah that Hashem gave me. Eventually I will understand it. But it's not measured on the basis of whether I agree with it or I don't agree with it, whether it makes sense to me or it doesn't make sense to me. This principle is of extreme importance. You have to understand how important this is. It's a difference between always feeling that you are in your own element, that you are in Eretz Yisrael, in your own land, and even though you have to struggle, but you're struggling with your own land, you're trying to build up your own land, or feeling that you are in exile, you're in a strange place, you don't belong here, and you're trying to protect yourself, you want to hold on to something. And all the questions, all the kashas that come up in a person's mind, I don't know if I can do it, I don't know if I'm fit for it, I don't know if my mind is able to do it, I can't get into it. All of that really is coming from the Atzaz HaMeragim. It's coming from the perspective of the Meragim. It's coming from the perspective that it is you with your own human mind that's able to take the Torah. And that's the limit with which you have. And this is not the case. This is not the case. Like I mentioned one time before, but the Gemara says that HaKoyre v'shoyne, when a Yid sits and learns Torah, whether he's saying Psukim and Psukim in Torah Shebiksav, or he's saying he's learning Torah Shebe'al Peh, the Torah that he learns, he thinks he's learning by himself. It's not true. Hashem is learning with him. What does that mean, Hashem is learning with him? It means that his neshama really relates to it and accepts it. His mind still, so to speak, his natural mind still needs to be worked on. But he already absorbed it. This is the same as when a person eats something that's healthy, but it doesn't taste so good. It doesn't taste so good. To him, he didn't develop that taste, so he doesn't know the taste of it. But the food is healthy anyway. Eventually, he grows up and he develops the taste for it also.
how does one able to change his mind from one side to another? And in particular, where do we see in the Torah that it's ours? So maybe there are some clues which help the person to relate to it as his thing which is given to him. Right? Maybe there's something there to
Well, this inyan, that it is ours, is clearly described in the Torah. First of all, as I said, even said Nasa v'Mishnu, which means they already felt it's theirs. But then, when Hashem gave us the Torah and He said the Aseres HaDibros, it says that when Hashem was saying the Aseres HaDibros, Eden, and as a matter of fact, weren't able to contain themselves. It says, I'll call Dibur Porcha Nishmosam. For every one of the Aseres HaDibros, Porcha Nishmosam, the Neshama flew out. Which means that they took the Torah not with their Seichel. They weren't able to take it with their Seichel. But they took it with their whole Mitzvahs, with their Neshama. So this inyan that it is ours, in the very term, Noisen HaTorah, Matan Torah means it was a gift. It's not something that is open there for you to take, but it was given to you. That's what the Bracha is saying. Noisen HaTorah, Hashem gives us a Torah, gave us a Torah. The inyan of how does one apply, so to speak, for your first question, how does one apply and change this attitude from, so to speak, testing the waters every time that he approaches something, or getting into it directly? That, in fact, is an avodah, and it definitely requires a reflection and understanding, but the principle is this. The principle behind this is to understand. See, we live in a world, this is something which is extremely important for me almost to point out the contrast to the world where we're coming from. We live in a world where the mind, the human mind is such, where not only do we, it's become accepted, so to speak, in human thought. It's become accepted in human thought that the world has no creator, that the world created itself, which is really mind-boggling. So even though we don't believe it, we certainly say, no, that's not what it is. Hashem created the world. But nevertheless, we were, so to speak, infected with that approach, with that mindset. And how were we affected? That the infection did, what it does is that we think what I am able to do for myself, that's all there is. If we would understand the koichos and the abilities that Hashem had put into us, if we would understand that for a human being to understand how to read is a godly gift. It's not something that you acquire by practicing, like some of the stupid ideas are. It's something which you have because it's a gift in the neshama. It's a godly quality. Hashem has put that ability into our neshama. Even the simplest human activity. Much more when we talk about thinking and understanding, we would reflect on this is a godly gift. Then we would be able to turn around and say, I don't have to rely on my own koyches. I don't have to rely on my own koyches. I'll tell you a story. This is an episode. There was a bocher who was a pretty good bocher. He was learning, and he eventually would become a Rav, would become quite a significant Rav. And he said to the Rebbe once in Yechidus, he says that I have a problem that I forget what I'm learning. A Rav can't forget. I mean, you learn, you have to be able to answer the question on the spot. I forget what I learned. What did the Rebbe tell him? You would think the Rebbe would tell him, chaz it over 100 times. That's not what the Rebbe said. The Rebbe said, when you learn, don't be concerned about remembering. Don't worry about it. So you can interpret that answer in many different ways. The way I understand it is very simply this. When you are concerned about remembering, you think that the reason you remember is because you imprint it into your mind. But that's not what happens. What happens is that your mind has the ability, if you open it up, the neshama has the ability to retain knowledge. Hashem gave you that koyach. And if you just trust, I learned, and I trust that if I learned, I'll remember. Then you're bringing in to play, you're drawing in. Koyches, you're relying on the koyches that Hashem gave you, rather than your own deed in your own action. And the same thing applies to remembering, it applies to learning and understanding also. Yeah.
What's the difference between the fighting to the enemy and the fighting on growing and everything in the niche, in the phase of learning? Where do you see the difference in fighting itself? How you know who you are fighting?
The difference is this. I mean, practically speaking, but you see the difference is this. That if you are fighting means that you're laboring to try to explain to yourself something. So let's say you want to learn how to read this word, and you learn how to read this letter, and you didn't finish reading this word. So you say, okay, I have this much. Tomorrow I'll learn this letter. Next day I'll learn this letter. Because you're on your own turf. You're in your own land. So you learn this which I know I have. If you fight against an enemy, you have nothing unless you defeat the enemy. As long as the enemy is shooting at you, you're not sure of anything. Did I learn this letter or not? I'm not sure. For this moment I did, next moment I didn't. It depends who is victorious at this moment. You understand the difference?
And the change you made with your friend Robin, the changes by...
The change, I can explain to Avram, right. You are at home, you're in your own turf, it's called. And whatever you do is yours. And the truth is, you learn it, it stays, it penetrates, your heart and mind understands it, and it stays there. It stays there. And the next day, you can build on that.
Does this have to do with the idea of how you approach the subject, approaching it as the wisdom of Hashem rather than approaching it as a secular subject? You mentioned that at the beginning.
It has to do, right, it has to, absolutely. A secular subject, the subject itself is man-made. And therefore, if you understand that, your understanding of it is on the man-made level. A Torah subject, the whole Torah concept, this is Hashem's wisdom. And the way you reach to it, the way you relate to it, is that you have in your mind, in your soul, you have the ability to relate to Hashem's wisdom. It's not something that you can create, that you can figure out and concoct. It says, the Medrash tells by Avraham Avinu. Avraham Avinu started out, Avraham Avinu was also about Shuvah. More than about Shuvah. He was a ger. Avraham Avinu started out in a household of idol worshippers. Not only in the household, but in the whole area. He started out with a chinuch that idol worship is the way to live. That's the whole truth. And then he started thinking to himself, and he started sensing that it doesn't make any sense. It cannot be. And he as the Rambam describes, his mind roamed and dug until he came to the conclusion that this is all false. And there has to be a boss, there has to be a creator. But he did not actually understand the creator until Hashem revealed himself to him. Now once you recognize that there is, with a human capability, we cannot recognize there is. But actually to relate to it, this is something Hashem gives us. So we can come and we say, like we come here, we say, I don't want the false secular world, I want to have some truth. And then when you come and you learn, there you learn with different koiches, with a different approach than that which even brought you here. Because then what you do is you open up your real chokhmah, your real seichel, your real neshama, and you begin to understand it from inside out rather than from outside in. Outside meaning, I don't like what I see here. Inside means, I can relate to it, this is my thing. This is the reality. If you recall, when we spoke about Seichel, I spoke about it many, many times to illustrate how Seichel works. What's Seichel? Seichel is a perception of a certain reality on a spiritual plane. Like you perceive that a human being is different than an animal. Human being is different than an animal. You can see his body is built different than an animal, and he walks differently, and he talks differently. But these are all external perceptions. The real thing that you perceive that a human being is other than an animal is that his whole purpose in life is different. His whole neshama is different. That's something that you perceive not because you have empirical proof for it. You can't measure it. This is something that you perceive in your seichel. You see that a human being is not an animal. That same type of perception exists by us to understand what is a spiritual union, what is a godly union, what is truth. This is not something which needs to be proven. This is something that we can relate to. We have it in our seichel. So what happens is, before we taste it, before we come here, we say, oh, I need something more true than this, than what I see in the secular world. When we come here, then we have to open up our mind and our souls and say, okay, let me relate to this truth. And that happens by learning Torah. Not by examining Torah, but by learning Torah. I always explain the difference between, we say you're learning Torah. Okay, the common expression in the secular world is, what would be the proper word? Study Torah. What's the difference between study and learning? Study means I'm examining it. I'm studying it. Do I agree with it? Right? I take measure, so to speak, of a certain idea. I'm studying it. Learning means it's something I'm not studying it. I'm absorbing it. I'm learning it.
Studying also it seems to denote just at best to memorize it in order to be able to take it in, just to be able to put it back out. There's no part in internalizing it.
Okay, right. That's like this. It depends. If you must study because you have to give an exam, so you take it in, so you have to remember. But the word study means to study at arm's length and to outside and to examine it and to see whether I can agree with it or not. We don't study Torah. We don't study Torah. We learn Torah. Every time that we learn a word of Torah, we allow it to come in. And we take it in. In Torah itself also there is Na'aseh v'Nishma. Na'aseh v'Nishma is not only to do mitzvahs and then to learn. Na'aseh v'Nishma is to learn Torah, the Poyel Mamash, that's also Na'aseh. First I learned it, I took it in. And then eventually my mind grows to be able to understand v'Nishma. But this is what the Pasuk says. If they hadn't sent Meraglim, they would have entered Eretz Yisrael without opposition. And we too, if we don't send Meraglim, then we enter into Torah without opposition. Not without work, but without opposition, without challenge. Hatzlacha.